Welcome to the New South Wales Council of Social Services Building Resilience for Emergency Responses podcast, where we hear from local, place-based services supporting their community through disasters. Ngunya Jarjum, Riverstone Neighbourhood Centre, Muslim Women Australia and the Family Place Maruya share their stories of leadership, innovation and commitment needed in difficult times.
Hello, I'm Prabha from the New South Wales Council of Social Service. Today I'm coming from Bundjalung country and would like to acknowledge the land on which I'm doing this interview and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'm speaking with Wendy Knight, a Bakunji woman who is the CEO of Ngunya Jarjum Child and Family Network. I'm also talking with Michelle Rogers, a Wiradjuri woman who is the Partnership and Engagement Manager at Ngunya Jarjum. Hi, Wendy. Hi, Michelle. Thanks so much for making the time to meet with me today. Wendy, I'd like to start with you. Could you please tell me a bit about yourself and Ngunya Jarjum?
Myself, Bakunji woman. I've lived on Bundjalung country for over 30 years. My son was born on Bundjalung country. Ngunya Jarjum was the first Aboriginal out-of-home care service provider that was funded by New South Wales. Initially, there was only 2 caseworkers, manager and admin staff. Now we've grown to over 60 staff with different program areas in working with children, families and community. I have to apologise, Prabha, for the disruption, the dirt, the building materials and the dust, but we are in the middle of trying to get together some office spaces.
And I want to tell our listeners that knocking that you might hear is the builders doing work in these offices.
The tradies are still at it.
Michelle, I'd love you to tell us about yourself as well and the work that you do at Ngunya Jarjum.
So I'm a Wiradjuri woman, Daby descent. I've been visiting now in Bundjalung country for over half my life.
Perhaps you could tell us what Ngunya Jarjum means.
Yep, Ngunya means yours, mine or ours, as in belonging to community, and Jarjum meaning children. So it's our children or a community sharing of children. We now provide care for over 140 children in the out-of-home care service delivery.
The work you do is so important to keep families together. But what we've been experiencing over the last 3 years hasn't been normal. It's been disaster after disaster. We've had fires, we've had floods, we've had COVID. Wendy, can you start by just telling us how the communities that Ngunya Jarjum works with, how have they been affected by the disasters?
It's been longer than 3 years in dealing with disaster and managing disaster recovery. We've had floods for the last 10 years. Prior to the big waters of 2022, we had 2017. Then we had in 2019 fires that were horrific. Then, of course, we had COVID, which just hammered our communities even more so.
I know the offices of Ngunya Jarjum were affected by the floods. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
We started getting notices come through on the Saturday, and myself and Michelle Hicks, my HR manager, said, okay, let's mobilise some of the crew. It's going to get to about 10 metres, so we'll get the cars out, we'll get as much as we can from the ground floor up, headed off out to the SES, got our sandbags, got our heavy plastic, and we were actually saying, easy, done. You know, we know it's going to come into the ground floor, we're right. And then Sunday evening, I'd seen through social media that it may get up to 11 metres. And I sort of acknowledged then, yeah, definitely, we're going to lose the ground floor. Throughout the night, I was checking the CCTV. I got up at about 5 o'clock. At that stage, I still had 4 cameras in the time that it had taken to get onto the news and social media to see what was going on, and then coming back to the CCTV, I'd lost all my cameras in a space of 25 minutes. That's when I started to cry. That's when I knew I'd lost my office. And that's when I knew that I'd have staff, family, friends and carer households that would lose everything.
So that's the double impact, isn't it? Ngunya Jarjum was impacted as an organisation. You had to look at that and the recovery of how you could continue your work to support already vulnerable families who you knew were going through the same level of devastation and destruction to their homes, their property, their way of life. What was it like for people who used your services?
One of the things that really came to life during the flood was the activation of the Koori grapevine, us knowing where each other are, what each other were going through, reaching to one another, using every resource we had available to be able to check in with one another, was really, really critical. I think I want to pop back to COVID and our fear of COVID, our understanding of COVID. As we watched what was going on overseas, talking to our board about what are we going to do if. We actually, fortunately, preempted even the initial lockdowns, knowing that we needed to be able to keep our communities safe from the pandemic. We saw what smallpox did to our people. We saw what the common cold did to our people. We saw what influenza did to our people at the time of the invasion. So we knew what COVID potentially could do to our mob.
So can you tell us a little bit about how that made you respond when you heard about COVID?
I sit on an Aboriginal medical service board in Ballina. So I've also been getting information about how they were managing the issues with community, business and everything else. When I started here, we've done an overhaul, brought in equipment and tools so people could be out on the road working. We stepped out that planned approach for not only carer households but for staff as well. What that looked like in terms of maintaining their caseload and case management, how we could effectively continue to work, but keeping ourselves safe, keeping carers safe and carer households safe. So we had to look at how we were going to do each of those steps, where within our budget are we going to be able to do it, because we're not funded for it.
This is the pivoting that you had to do.
And we saw actually through that COVID period where we're all in lockdown, families struggle just to get the basic necessities. We tried really hard in providing food vouchers for our families. Actually received some funding recently where we were able to provide fuel vouchers for families to help out with petrol costs, packs to keep kids entertained while they were stuck in home while we were in lockdown, which is a huge one, just to keep them entertained. We provided devices, whether it be laptops or iPads for every child in care so they could continue learning through with the schools.
So we talked about the fact that your offices were completely flooded. As I look out at Lismore, if I didn't know about the floods, I wouldn't immediately be able to see the impact, but I'm not someone who knows Lismore. So I'm wondering, what do you notice as different?
I noticed that every shop is empty. I noticed that there's houses uninhabited with broken windows and doors wide open that are uninhabitable, still full of floodwater, flood mud in their walls, people removing their walls in order to manage mould, living in a shell of a property. I walk through town and what I see is sadness, what I feel is sadness, what I still see is mud everywhere I go.
But on the positive, we see more businesses come back. Lismore Square with the larger, Woolworths, Coles, Target, Kmart was huge.
Watching those big corporations reinvesting in Lismore and actually not just closing doors and walking away or building new places up on hills further away, that's encouraging.
And in terms of the longer term impact of these cumulative disasters, what have you noticed as the impact on community members?
We've got whole communities that are displaced. Take, for example, Cabbage Tree Island mob. Down Wardell Way, they're living out of pods, caravans or camper trailers, and in some cases are being treated horribly in some of the places that they're staying, caravan parks and such. The toll, especially on our old ones, is horrendous. The uncertainty, the length of time it's taken to get some adequate housing, not just for mob down there, for all of Far North Coast. And, every town that was hit and having issues around housing, mental health, employment, just being able to afford food.
For me, I think about the re-triggering of displacement in practice. So given the policies of the past and the forced displacement of our people from land, from country, from belonging, I acknowledge that this is a different reason for that displacement to be happening. But that doesn't take away from the re-feeding into the trauma of the impact of the policies of the past. That uncertainty, that not being assured about what happens next or how it happens or how they return to land, country and belonging, that uncertainty re-triggers the government policies around the forced removal of our people from our lands.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that to light, because I think that aspect of the real multiple traumas on Indigenous communities can sometimes be lost. What would you want to say to government?
Trust us to know what we're doing with our people. Trust us to be able to lead with culture, to lead with sensitivity, to care for our own. Trust us to know what our people need throughout disasters, throughout crisis. Resource us to be able to implement our own plans. Understand that blackfellas know what blackfellas are doing.
And particularly with our backgrounds, we both have disaster recovery backgrounds in the department. I've worked in floods, fires.
I've managed evacuation centres on behalf of DCJ during my time there. We're not new to this field.
If you were to talk to other organisations about how they could engage in a disaster recovery space, what would be the things you'd want to tell them?
To these fellas, the funded service providers who were specifically funded for disaster recovery, and I don't know of any ACO that is, so they're all non-Aboriginal. Listen. The government service providers, listen to what the ACOs are saying to you, or what the communities are saying to you. To the emergency services, listen to the old ones who know about the land. Listen to the ACOs who know about the communities. Listen to the communities who know about the families. It's not that hard. Listen. Just frustrates me.
Because it's that simple.
It is. Honestly.
Yep.
It's that simple.
I want to say to other agencies, it's not all about money. It's not all about resources. It's about heart. It's about bringing truth to the space. It's about empowering us to be and do who it is that we are in our own way. If they do that right, it means that they have been listening.
What I'm also hearing you say is invest in community, in organisations that are embedded in their communities.
We answer to our community, and we know that we're going to be called to account. I don't think the other big lesson we've learned over the last few years is knowing when to put our pen down and to be a member of our community, not just an agency. Understanding and knowing when to sit with and be with our community in pain together is part of our healing as a communal people. And I think that that's something that NJ has learned to do really, really well. And I believe that because of that, we're able to deliver richer services that are more purposeful for our mob.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Wendy, for
Thank
spending time with me today.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We thank our podcast guests for their time and valuable insights. The New South Wales Council of Social Service Building Resilience for Emergency Responses podcast was made possible with funding from the New South Wales Government's Social Sector Transformation Fund. For more podcasts, case studies and disaster resilience tools for your service, visit the Building Resilience for Emergency Responses webpage on the NCOS website, www.ncos.org.au.